Thank you very much, Great Sage. It is certainly good to be here for you on this Thursday, the 22nd evening/afternoon, depending on where you are, of the month of April in the year of our Lord 2020. I do come to you live from the home base, my home base, the ReliefFactor.com studios of AM 1420, The Answer in Cleveland, Ohio. And Ohio just kind of became the centerpiece now, I guess. Kind of just became ground zero, I guess, in the ongoing war, the race war that has enveloped this country due to a war on cops. And yes, it is indeed exactly as I am describing it, and we are going to dive into this today with people in this state. Coming up in about a half an hour, at about 34 minutes past this hour, we are going to talk with the president of the Fraternal Order of Police in the state of Ohio. His name is Gary Wolski. We are going to talk with his vice president of the Ohio FOP, who also happens to be a Columbus, Ohio police officer, Jason Pappas. And we're going to talk to them about everything that went on in Columbus, and we're going to talk to them about everything that is going on nationally as the war on cops is elevated perhaps to a higher level than it was. Well, not perhaps. It is elevated to a higher level than it was after Ferguson, after Baltimore, after any of the recent incidents involving uses of force in which police officers were either cleared or convicted, but all of which resulted in the same thing, extraordinary amounts of violence, and a reminder that this country is no longer, its criminal justice system is no longer a system in which someone who is accused of a crime, particularly if it's a police officer involving a use of force incident, the person accused of a crime is no longer given a trial by a jury of his peers. Now, it's a trial by a jury of rioters. That's what it has become. That's where we have devolved as a society as it pertains to our criminal justice system. We are now in a place where if cops are charged with excessive force or lethal force or whatever, it's a trial by riot. If enough people gather outside, ready with their bricks and their frozen water bottles and their baseball bats and their skateboards and their urine bombs and their fireworks and all of the rest of the things that they use to destroy cities, especially if they get a head start in the destruction due to a related incident or a similar style incident, that jurors who are not sequestered can be exposed to that intimidation and will deliver verdicts based upon the level of rioting that's going to result if they come up with the wrong one. Famed Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz brought this up this week. Well, yesterday, because it was in reaction to the Derek Chauvin conviction. The KKK in the 1920s and the 1930s used to do what Maxine Waters and BLM and Antifa do in the 2020s. In the 1920s, a century ago, the KKK would come out outside of courthouses if there were black defendants on trial, and they would have their full-on hate robes, and they would have their little pointy hats, and they would have their torches, and they would make it very clear to the jurors what kind of a verdict they wanted. And if they didn't get it, there was going to be a problem for those jurors. That kind of intimidation and hate from the 1920s is now replicated in 2020 and 2021, in this new decade, where rioters come outside and make it very clear, especially when they splatter a witness for the defense's home, or at least what they thought was the witness's home, with pig's blood. Obvious reference to police officers, referred to by those who hate them as pigs. If that's what they do to a witness, hey, jury, wait until you see what's in store for you if you don't come back with the verdict we want. I have no love lost, no empathy for, no concern about Derek Chauvin. What I have a great concern about is the rule of law in America and the criminal justice system and the trial system, which is now in very, very serious jeopardy. And now we go, as I said, to kind of the new epicenter, if you will, of the anti-police movement in this country, the war on cops part 2. Or maybe it's just it's a new battle. In Columbus, Ohio, well, let me back up for 1 second if I can. I want to start this properly so you really have context, okay? And I promise you we'll go to the phone calls. Plenty of time for you to talk tonight or today, depending on where you are. But on Monday, here in the state of Ohio, in which I reside, down in Cincinnati, about 3.5 hours to my southwest, down in Cincinnati, a 13-year-old girl by the name of Janiah Pate fatally stabbed a 13-year-old girl named Naira. I hope I'm doing that right. It's Naira, and my apologies if I'm not. But Naira Givens. She stabbed her to death with a pocket knife. She slashed her right across the side of her neck. And as you can imagine, it did not take long for her to bleed to death. She was pronounced dead at the hospital very short time later. Now, this is a 13-year-old girl who just killed another 13-year-old girl. It shouldn't matter, but it does because this is where we are. Both young girls are black. Have you heard the name Naira Givens come across the lips of Joe Biden? Have you heard the name of Naira Givens come across the lips of Kamala Harris? Has it passed the lips of Jen Psaki? Has it been uttered by Benjamin Crump? Has it been spoken by anyone associated with Black Lives Matter? Not a word. Naira Givens is dead of a stabbing wound or a slashing wound by another girl. This happened on Monday, and nobody cares. Now we come to Wednesday in Columbus, Ohio. Now we come to a 16-year-old black girl named Ma'Khia Bryant chasing and trying to stab 2 other black girls, also teenagers, in Columbus, Ohio. The difference between the Columbus stabbing and the Cincinnati stabbing is there was a police officer on the scene the second time. And in this case, after Ma'Khia Bryant, the 16-year-old with a big butcher knife, first slashed at the first victim, who fell to the ground, thankfully avoiding the blade, as Ma'Khia Bryant turned to charge at and attack the second would-be victim. And in this case, a police officer was on the scene, watched her pull her right arm back with the butcher knife in it, and before it could plunge forward, he shot her and saved the life of an innocent girl. Let me say that again. The story here is that a police officer avoided the similar situation or an identical situation that happened in Cincinnati. Instead of a brutal stabbing death from one perpetrator, one assaulter against an innocent victim, in this case, there would have been 2 stabbing deaths. Instead of that, 2 innocent lives were saved, and the perpetrator was stopped in the course of committing this murder. The story, instead of hero cop saves 2 black lives, according to the far left and the media, it's disgraced cop kills 16-year-old black girl. Somebody is going to have to make some sense out of this for me. He literally saved someone's life that was about to be taken by an angry, much larger perpetrator. And he is now on the defensive. I've got more on this story for you, and I want to hear from you as well as we continue on the Larry Elder Show.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
Burbank is a particularly despicably run city. Their commitment to freedom is an embarrassment. They're the ones I condemned years ago, as I explained earlier. You can't smoke a cigar in a cigar shop in Burbank. Health über alles. It is a form of health fascism, which I've said health über alles, right? Health above all. Power to the restaurant was shut off March 13th after the city received permission from an L.A. County Superior Court judge to do so. The judges it doesn't matter. There's no recourse. Nobody values freedom. They only value what the health authorities say. It's an amazing thing. These people go to college and graduate school and then question nothing. Oh, the health authorities. That's it. That's all you have to say, health authorities. How about if I think I'll die, I won't go into Tin Horn Flats? How's that? Why is that not an option? Oh, because then I'll give it to others. Well, then you can't have anything. No place can be open, which is what they wanted and did. Dr. Fauci can't explain why the Texas numbers are not going up. Remember, he warned against that. Texas opened up. Gee, they're not dropping dead like flies.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
Here we go.
Breaking now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
Vice President Kamala Harris will travel to Guatemala and Mexico in her role in tackling the root causes of the migration crisis we're facing at our southern border. I'm not kidding you. Kamala Harris made an announcement. She was asked by reporters at a roundtable discussion about whether she's going to visit the border itself. She didn't answer. Then she said her job is to focus on the root cause of the migration problem and that she will be traveling to Mexico and Guatemala soon. She will be involved, according to the White House, in high-level diplomatic work. Yeah, it's diplomatic work, all right. She's going to go to Guadalajara to try to deal with our immigration problem. Great. We're in great hands. Senator John Thune, Republican from South Dakota, had a suggestion about infrastructure, since we're paying just pennies on the dollar for infrastructure. He had a kind of a novel idea. Senator Thune has a suggestion about how we can spend some of that infrastructure money.
And now they've got this humanitarian crisis, national security crisis down there, which is desperately in need of a solution. One of the things they could do, there's been a lot of talk about infrastructure. The administration is talking about infrastructure.
Stage 20 minutes after the hour. You know, this talk show wants you to know the truth behind the Georgia election law and why we support it, despite efforts to smear it with untruths about its content. As long as public companies are getting involved in an effort to hurt the state of Georgia, our company wants to stand by the truth and correct the record. We also believe Major League Baseball, Delta, Coca-Cola, and the other businesses have been badly misled about the new Georgia law and should act to correct the record before consumers decide to fly other airlines or drink other beverages or stay away from the ballparks this summer. We believe voting security and expanded voting access provided by the new Georgia law, and we urge you to join us in doing so. How? You can join us by signing the petition. Let them know of your opinion. At the top of the LarryElder.com page, you will see the Stand With Georgia banner. Please click that banner. It is extraordinarily important that we correct. This is all kind of tied to what we're talking about tonight. The big lie, the big myth, the big narrative, the fairy tale, the fiction that African Americans are under attack in this country, that black and brown people are somehow, some way being just completely oppressed and destroyed by white supremacy and white privilege and all of these fantasy things that they continue to talk about, whether it's the voting situation and suggesting that blacks don't know how to get IDs and to have a voter ID law is to suppress the black vote. Or, of course, in the case of police and officer-involved shootings, and that's where we'll continue. I want you to hear, if I may, this is just kind of, I don't know if it's fun, it's interesting to listen to what stupidity sounds like. You ever want, you can look up the dictionary definition of stupidity. Sometimes they say, well, this person's picture would be the next to the word stupid in the dictionary. Well, I don't know about the picture, but this is what stupid sounds like.
And he said, that the cop had no choice or something to that effect. And my feeling is, I don't know if that's true or not. I really can't figure it out anymore. It seems to me, in a situation, this is what it looked like to me, and I've looked at the tape and I still can't figure it out.
That's because you're stupid.
Shoot the gun in the air as a warning, tase a person, shoot them in the leg, shoot them in the behind, stop them somehow. But if the only solution is to kill a teenager, there's something wrong with this. There's something very, very wrong with the way these things are being conducted, even if the cop had to do it.
Even if the cop had to do it, there's something very wrong with him doing it. Shoot the gun in the air. Let me tell you something. That was, if you did not recognize the voice of stupid there, that was Joy Behar cackling from her perch on the nest on The View. And Joy Behar said maybe the officer could have fired the shot in the air. You know what that would have done? That would have simply hurt the ears of the murderer that was attempting to kill a young girl with a big butcher blade. That's all it would have done. You know what the result of shooting a gun into the air would have been? A dead teenager. And probably, if the officer froze and still wouldn't shoot even after the stabbing, another dead teenager, because there were two that she was going after. That's what Joy Behar says. Now, she's free to be as stupid as she wants. She's only on The View. What about actual reporters on the beat? What about actual reporters who are supposed to be practicing journalism? Here's one talking to the chief of police in Columbus about why the officer had to shoot the knife-wielding attempted murderer in the body.
Is finished.
Chief, one of the big questions that has been asked primarily on social media, and it may seem like a silly question that, shouldn't people already know, but this is a legitimate question that a lot of people are asking, is can an officer shoot the leg? Can they shoot somewhere that would not result in a fatal wound, right? So a lot of people have said, couldn't he have just shot her in the leg so she dropped? Couldn't he have shot her in the arm? Something like that.
Right. Yeah. I look for some modicum of intelligence from these reporters who are supposed to be, providing the people with information about what is going on here. Some modicum of intelligence. And all you get from these hacks in what used to be a respected profession of journalism is a bunch of people who watch too many movies. In real life, police officers are not trained to shoot the leg. In real life, you don't shoot one in the arm to make her drop the gun or the knife. Do you know how hard it is to hit a target? Do you know how difficult it is? Have you ever fired a gun at a target? Much less a moving target in a lethal situation in which your blood is pumping and your adrenaline is pumping? And your mind is racing? Do you know how hard it is to shoot a target? They don't train people to shoot arms and legs. Why not just in the hand, to shoot the knife right out of the hand? Maybe it won't even hit the hand. It'll just hit the knife and ping, it'll fall away. You're trained to shoot center mass because that is the only chance you have of hitting anything. Then, if you miss, maybe Maybe if you're a little bit off because of the center mass, maybe you'll hit somebody in the arm or the leg. You don't aim at a little tiny target. The chief of police answered that question properly. I would have been a little bit more forceful.
You know, one of the difficult things with that is when you're trying, we don't train to shoot the leg because that's a small target. We train to shoot center mass. What is available to stop that threat? There was a threat going on, a deadly force threat that was going on, so the officer is trained to shoot center mass, the largest part of a body that is available to them.
And you know, he was okay, but he just said, we train to do that. I wish he would have said, not possible, numbskull. Not possible. You don't shoot little tiny things like arms and legs or hands. You shoot center mass. If you have to use your gun, it's because a lethal force situation is in play. If you pull your gun and it's not a lethal force situation, then you don't shoot anywhere. You should never have pulled the gun in the first place. But this is where we are. Then you get Valerie Jarrett. You remember Valerie Jarrett from the Obama administration? Valerie Jarrett taking to Twitter yesterday. A black teenage girl named Ma'Khia Bryant was killed because a police officer immediately decided to shoot her multiple times in order to break up a knife fight. Demand accountability. Fight for justice. Hashtag Black Lives Matter. Valerie, a black teenage girl named Ma'Khia Bryant, was trying to commit murder against another black teenage girl. She was stopped from doing so thanks to a heroic officer who shot when there was no other alternative. There, I fixed it for you. And oh, by the way, I'm getting really, really tired of people saying knife fight. This wasn't a knife fight. A knife fight would indicate two equally armed combatants squaring off a la Sharks and Jets in West Side Story. This wasn't I've got my blade, you've got yours, let's do this. No, this was an assault. This was an attempted murder. A large butcher knife against nothing. That's not a knife fight. A police officer here, heroic police officer here named Nicholas Reardon, saved 2 black lives. And what does he get for his efforts? He gets the President of the United States, through his spokesperson, essentially calling him a racist killer. And he gets LeBron James, arguably the biggest celebrity in the world, at least in the world of sports, telling him, you're next. We're going to talk about that next on The Larry Elder Show.
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com. President Biden has formally established a commission to consider adding seats to the Supreme Court. Justices Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Stephen Breyer, both appointed by a Democratic president, have opposed it, but the left is angry. They don't like the Supreme Court's rulings, so they want to change its composition. It's called court packing, from when, in 1937, Democratic President Franklin Roosevelt tried and failed to do it. President Biden must have forgotten he once called the idea of expanding the Supreme Court a terrible, terrible mistake and boneheaded. And make no mistake, it is a terrible idea. Any politically driven effort to change the court's structure will only reinforce the perception that our judicial branch is guided by politics rather than by legal principle. Over time, a packed court would surely erode confidence in the rule of law, which is indispensable to governing a free people. I'm Carol Platt-Liebau.
Publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
And how hard was it for 3 vaccines to be created in less than a calendar year? Could you give us some of the inside story? How hard was it to get the U.S. government with the corporations to create that historic success?
Well, it was very hard. We had an FDA that takes a long time to approve things, as you know. You had Fauci saying it's going to take 3 years, maybe much longer. Most people thought you couldn't do it in 5 years. Most people thought you'd never even get a vaccine. I felt confident. And we did something else. We spent billions of dollars on manufacturing the vaccine before we even knew if it was going to work. It was a calculated risk. And if we didn't do that, you wouldn't have had it for 9 months after the date that they announced, which, as you know, because of what I did with drug prices, with the favored nations clause, that's going to be the biggest thing ever, assuming Biden keeps it, for drug prices. The drug companies aren't exactly in love with me, and they announced it 2 days after. I think everyone knew we were right there, but they announced it 2 days after. Now, supposing they announced it before, though, Sebastian, the press would have played it down. So if they announced it before, they would have acted like no big deal. When they announced it after, they made a big deal out of it. But between the FDA, who we pushed at a level that they've never been pushed before. So we got the vaccine done in less than 9 months, and it would have taken 3 to 5 years. I don't think they ever would have had it.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
Power structure in our country that's outside of the government. Private companies that fund the political campaigns of people in both political parties are a bigger threat to our freedoms and liberties than even our own government. Now, I'm not saying that our government is not a threat to our freedoms and liberties. Of course it is. But we have a process to make sure that those freedoms and liberties are protected and not infringed upon. The Second Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, even the Eighth Amendment. Due process, cross-examination of witnesses, a speedy trial of your peers, not to have excessive bail. All these things are clearly defined in the Bill of Rights.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
The Vice President of the United States of America. Honest to goodness, this is like a skit right out of the TV show Veep. You ever seen it? Julia Louis-Dreyfus? I'm warning you, it's definitely R-rated or PG-13. Lots of, bad language. But it's honestly one of the most hysterical political satires in the history of political satires. And Kamala Harris is Julia Louis-Dreyfus. What's her character's name? It's
the southern end of this state. In Cincinnati on Monday, a 13-year-old black girl stabbed to death another 13-year-old black girl. No one is talking about that young 13-year-old black victim. The only person people in the state of Ohio and across the country are talking about now is a 16-year-old black girl who was also trying to stab somebody in the city of Columbus. That 16-year-old black person or black girl was not successful because a police officer stopped her in the act of committing murder. Why is no one talking about the life that was saved? The only thing people are talking about is the must-be racist killer cop who shot a 16-year-old black girl instead of shooting her in the leg or firing into the air to scare her. And the war on cops continues. Joining me now from, partially from Columbus, partially from Northeast Ohio in the Cleveland area where I am. Gary Wolski is in Northeast Ohio. He is a retired police officer from Garfield Heights, Ohio, is now the president of the Fraternal Order of Police in the state of Ohio. Gary, thanks for coming on. How are you, sir?
Great, Bob. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Pleasure to have you. And joining Gary in this conversation is his vice president with the Ohio FOP, Jason Pappas, who is an active police officer in Columbus, Ohio. Jason, thank you very much for the time as well. How are you?
I'm well, Bob. Thanks for having me this evening.
It's a pleasure to have both of you here, and I really appreciate you coming on to discuss this. Jason, I know you are, as you do your duties as the vice president of the FOP, are not on active patrol at the moment, but obviously you are probably still very tight with the men and women of the Columbus Police Department. Can you tell me anything about how they are reacting right now as all of this national attention focuses on the... And by the way, I understand ahead of time you can't speak to the specifics of this case that is under investigation, but can you talk about how your fellow officers are dealing with this right now?
Sure, and again, thanks for having me tonight. I will tell you that the general tone of law enforcement, not just in Columbus, but across the state and across this country, is very dismal. Officers are weary. They've had an incredible 2 years of, negative media attention. They have been worked for very long hours under very stressful conditions, under intense scrutiny, and oftentimes without the support of their political leaders, which is the case here in Central Ohio. And nationally, quite frankly, I've seen the national news lately where our national politicians are talking about the issue as well when they're not here and they don't know. I will say generally, the national media stories do tend to be bombastic, but in my day-to-day conversations with the residents of Central Ohio here, they understand the predicament and they're supportive of the officers. So it's easy for the officers to lose sight of that, but the vast majority of the citizens here still support them and understand the situation that occurred and understand that the officer was justified.
It's one thing for national politicians and elected officials to come down on you guys and to come down on Nicholas Reardon in this case, but what about your local leadership? I listened to Ginther, the mayor of Columbus, yesterday on this speaking in his press conference about how, in his long dramatic pauses, another young black life taken, as if to say this is another mistake made by Columbus police or by police. I just thought it was reprehensible to suggest that in any way, shape, or form this incident was like any other incident when he said yet another, as if somehow race played a role in any way, shape, or form in somebody trying to stop an active, in progress attempted murder.
Well, I will add that, violent crime here in Columbus is on the rise. It has been on the rise since 2015. Things have been escalating, and there's been, little effort put forward, in my opinion, to prevent it. Now, having said that, I agree with you, and I think the approach is quite the opposite. I believe the focus should be on the 2 lives saved. And I know the sentiment seemed to be on one, but as I watched the video, I actually believe that there were 2 young people who were saved.
Absolutely.
A couple of days ago, and so I applaud the officer for his actions. I do believe they were heroic.
Yeah, no, I believe 2 lives were saved as well. Do you feel supported by the mayor? Do you feel supported by Columbus government?
No, not particularly. Again, the citizens I think are pretty reasonable in most of them. There's a lot of influence from outside organizations and other places.
Let me interrupt that thought, if I may, Jason Pappas. Let me interrupt that thought because I've got a hard break here. We're going to get our time out, as I told you guys about. We'll come back and let you finish that thought and then talk to Gary Wolski as well right here on The Larry Elder Show.
Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
Where do you think we are in this country? Where do you think we are, and where do you think we may be going?
We are now with a president who refused to answer the questions straightforwardly as a candidate, who has now made it very clear he's going to make every effort with a high probability of success to pack the Supreme Court of the United States. This is something he avoided throughout the campaign. It was not his finest or most candid moment in his campaign, among, I would say, a number of such moments. So I think, this is just the latest latest development in altering what is America, our government, and the relationship with the governed. It's clear that there's an effort to change the relationship between the governed and the government, to make the government larger and more ubiquitous, if such a thing is imaginable. I think that, and partly the reason for that, if you will, suspended cognitive realization on the part of the American people is because the national media, it's left wing, but nonetheless, it is the national media, is not in any way bringing critical judgment or great energy to their responsibilities to be either a watchdog or to challenge power.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
I say this, I am looking at it very seriously, beyond seriously. From a legal standpoint, I don't want to really talk about it yet.
Beyond seriously. I'm looking at it beyond seriously. That was the 45th President of the United States being asked about will he run for the White House again for 2024. Put the mics on, gentlemen, and get the headphones on. I'm going to survey the massive team here. It's going to take at least 3 hours to get all the answers in. This is America First on the Salem Radio Network. What does that mean to you?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
Nancy Pelosi, I think, embodied this best. Do we have that clip of Nancy Pelosi? Yeah. So before I play that clip, Nancy Pelosi was talking about George Floyd. And I want you to think about this deeply. As she says this, she says, "Thank you, George Floyd, for dying." Only a religious person would be thanking somebody for dying if they believed that sacrifice was a martyr for a certain purpose. I kid you not, this is what Nancy Pelosi said. Play tape.
So again, thank you, George Floyd, for sacrificing your life for justice, for being there to call out to your mom. How heartbreaking was that?
17 minutes before the top of the hour, we continue now with the two leaders of the Fraternal Order of Police in the state of Ohio. The president is Gary Wolski. His vice president is Jason Pappas. Jason is an active duty officer in Columbus, Ohio. And I've got one more question for the vice president before we turn to Gary Wolski for big picture. Jason, I was asking you if you feel supported by the government in the city of Columbus, and obviously Mayor Ted Ginther. I would suggest no, not at all. And you started to talk about how the people, however, are a little bit more supportive. What is your feeling on the Ohio State students? Ohio State is a city unto itself, 55,000 students on campus. And from what I understand, they are demanding, and we're staging a sit-in, hundreds of them, demanding that the university sever ties with Columbus police because of what happened here with Ma'Khia Bryant. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I've seen very similar things in the past from the university students. I saw the march, the protest the other day. It was a couple hundred students out of 60,000 that are at Ohio State. There was another incident that happened early in the year where they were demanding separation from the Columbus Division of Police, and shortly thereafter, one of their off-campus parties, a student was murdered, and that sentiment went away pretty quickly. This is in that same vein. This is temporary. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It's a very, very, very small number. And as I conclude my thoughts here, we're talking about A lot of this is just kind of riled up. We have one city council member who was with them. You think about the city of, and the population that we have here, more than 1 million people. You have a couple hundred downtown with one city council member. I think it shows that they're by far the minority and not really being taken seriously.
Yeah, I have some audio from that city council person, which I will play in a little bit, but I want to go to the president of the FOP now, Gary Wolski. Gary, you and I talk all the time about morale when it comes to policing, and these are situations that oftentimes aren't in Ohio. The Floyd situation or the Ferguson situation, wherever. You and I will talk all the time because the mainstream media, the national media, is demonizing all cops for the actions of a few bad and worse for many good who have been decided to be bad or who have been turned into or have been, the narrative has been that they were bad, that they shouldn't have made the decision to shoot in these cases. So now that it's a little closer to home, now that we've got cases in the state of Ohio, including this latest with Micaiah Bryant, again, the question goes to morale. How are cops supposed to cop? How are they supposed to be police when they know their every move, even if they save a life, as happened in this case, is going to be scrutinized, criticized, and potentially even prosecuted?
They can't, Bob. I mean, look at that situation in Columbus. I know, we're not going to get much into that because it's not fair to the officer. But had he not done anything, I promise you the narrative would be, why was that cop standing not doing anything? Officers are in a situation now where they can't win. You're damned if you do and damned if you don't. Nobody wants this job anymore. You can, Jason knows better than most the number of people that take police tests now. I mean, Columbus can't get people. Nobody can get people. Nobody wants this job. Nobody wants to be scrutinized for every decision that they make in a split second in a highly stressful, volatile situation where lives are at risk, and then have somebody give an answer of how they should have done it 5 minutes later when they weren't there before they even know the evidence. That's the part that bothers most law enforcement officers the most. If you want to criticize us, at least wait till all the evidence is in, the investigation is done, and those investigators determine if you were right or wrong. Not some politician or some media person who's trying to sell airtime and commercial time on their mainstream media stations to decide, hey, they were wrong no matter what. We constantly hear that systemic racism in law enforcement. There is no systemic racism in law enforcement. You did a great job the other day with some information from I think it's a McIver is the way it's pronounced.
The MacIver Institute,
There is absolutely no statistical proof that cops are racist. More white folks are killed by law enforcement than African American folks, by a lot. And by studies by the National Academy of Sciences, no significant evidence of anti-black disparity in the likelihood of being fatally shot by the police. It just doesn't happen. This year alone, 50 white folks have been killed by the police and 30 blacks. How does that make a cop racist?
What I would say, Gary, what I would say to prove this point, and by the way, when you say there's no proof that they're racist, not only that, there is absolutely proof and evidence that they are not. There's absolutely a ton of evidence, statistical evidence, that proves they are much less likely to pull the trigger when they have a black suspect in a potential lethal force situation than they do with a white. But what I would ask is, name one of the white victims. You just said 50 white people have been shot in this year alone by police officers, 30 African Americans. Name one white. You can't. No one can, because it's never news. But every time there is an officer-involved shooting, even in a case like this, a suspect is clearly armed and about to stab. Literally, the arm is pulled back, the right arm, you can see it in the video, about to lunge forward to either slash or stab the victim, and the police officer shoots him, or shoots her, rather, and you know her name. You know her name every time. You do not know any of the white victims or white suspects that have been shot, because it's not part of the story, is it?
No. And Bob, why is it that the media just can't say that a police officer shot and killed a suspect who was attempting to stab somebody? Why can't that be the narrative? Why does it always have to be a white officer or a black officer killed a black person? Why do we have to throw the color of a person's skin into it? It doesn't play into these decisions that law enforcement officers make. These officers were called to the scene of a fight, a violent fight, which was evidenced by the body cam footage. I mean, this girl, like you and Jason said earlier, she almost stabbed the first girl that wound up on her back on the ground, and then went after the second girl that was pinned against that car and had nowhere to go. Right. Had that officer not taken that action, that girl would have been hopefully not killed, but certainly seriously stabbed and wounded.
Gary, the chief down there was asked. The chief down there was asked when she had her pinned like that, why not just shoot in the leg? Why not just shoot in the arm?
Because John Wayne doesn't exist in local police departments.
That's exactly what I said. These people watch too many movies. They think if it happens in the movies that way, it must be able to be happen in real. It must, happen in real life.
Yeah.
But it simply does not. Gary, last question. I've got less than 30 seconds. You've been retired now for a few years from active duty. Now you work, of course, with the union, with the FOP. If you were a 22-year-old again, would you go to the academy right now?
Absolutely not.
And that is a sad, sad reality. I believe you wholeheartedly, and that is a sad reality. There are fewer and fewer who are going to be going into academies because they know what awaits them. Jason Pappas, Vice President of the FOP in Ohio. Gary Wolski, President of the FOP. Thank you both very much for your perspectives.
Thanks, Bob. We appreciate it. Take care.
Thanks very much. 9 minutes before the top of the hour. We'll be back.
Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
It wasn't just Derek Chauvin. And I also don't want this moment to be framed as this system working, because it's not working.
Now, the most depressing part of that, for those of you on radio or podcast you can't tell, is that mountain of gibberish that she just spouted for 30 seconds. Couldn't really make sense of it. There were just like this line of comments, one after the other, of people being like, preach, OMFG, you're amazing, you go girl. I can't really make sense of anything she just said, except for the fact that she is displeased.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Polk County, Florida Sheriff Grady Judd yesterday, when Ron DeSantis, the governor, signed an anti-riot bill, he said this.
This is what we enjoy in Florida. This is the Florida we know and love. This is what our governor, our speaker, our president, this is what all these law enforcement officers and administrators and sheriffs and police chiefs and their officers do every day. They guarantee an environment where you can come here and have fun. Heck, you can even have more fun. Here's another picture. This is the Florida we know and love. We're a special place. And there are millions and millions of people who like to come here. And quite frankly, we like to have them here. We only want to share one thing as you move in hundreds a day. Welcome to Florida. But don't register to vote and vote the stupid way you did up north. You'll get what they got. There's a reason that this place is fun. There's a reason why we have a 49-year low crime rate.
Now, Ron DeSantis, speaking about the state, was on with Tucker last night.
I think the lockdowns, provided an impetus to be able, because people need an outlet to do things. And so I think some of these states like Minnesota, California, I think the fact that they were locked down and had the opportunity to go out and do stuff, I think that added fuel to the fire of what was going on. So I think the fact that we took a hard line on that, people understood Florida as a law and order state, but also that we were open, I think has been a huge factor in people moving to Florida.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
Yes, indeed. 6 minutes before the top of the hour, thanks to Gary and Jason from Ohio, where the latest is going on. Coming up in about, what are we looking at, about 15 minutes now, maybe a little bit less. We're going to have another great guest. We're going to talk to Heather MacDonald. Heather MacDonald is a fellow at the Manhattan Institute, author of The War on Cops, and author of her latest book, which is The Diversity Delusion. She has got statistics upon statistics upon statistics and facts upon facts upon facts about the reality of blacks and whites and their interactions with police officers in the United States, both civil and violent interactions. You're going to want to hear that conversation, I promise you. Meantime, we'll take some phone calls here. We'll go to West Virginia, and that's where I find Missy waiting. Missy, you're on the Larry Elder Show. Bob France sitting in here in Ohio. Go right ahead, Missy.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. What's on your mind?
I have three things, and I'll be quick on all of them. So they keep telling us that the entire country and every system in it has been rooted and founded on systemic racism. If it's always been that way, then how will we know when it's not?
That's a really interesting question. Okay, go ahead.
My next point, if cops shoot black people because of their skin, then why do they shoot white people?
Okay, what's number three?
If laws are written and they're unbiased, then why do we keep making them personal and racist? If you want racism to go away, stop making it where it isn't. I was a cop for 20 years. When I worked an accident, I didn't care about your race. When your child was missing, I didn't care about your race. And if you're trying to kill me, I don't care about your race. So if you want racism to go away, I suggest the media stop giving it attention, and it will.
Yeah, well, it's not just giving it attention, but stop inventing it where it doesn't exist. Let me ask you, if you get a radio call to respond to a violent confrontation and potential knife attack, and you see somebody drawing her arm back to stab somebody else with a butcher knife, do you care what color that person is, Missy, as an officer?
I don't. I don't care what color they are, and unfortunately, their age doesn't matter to me either. I care about the fact that I'm trying to save a life, not take a life. Amen. That cop had no intention of killing her. He had the intention of stopping the threat. Unfortunately, she died. Stop making things where they don't exist. Any person who commits a crime is a criminal. Stop making them a victim.
Very, very well said. Missy, thank you so much for that phone call and with your expertise there as a 20-year officer as well. Here's the thing I'll say to wrap up this hour. I don't care what color Micaiah Bryant is. I don't care what color Nicholas Reardon, the officer, is. I don't care what color the victim is. What I will tell you is if she plunges that knife into that victim, we all know what color is coming out because we all bleed the same color. And that's the only thing that matters here. He tried to stop somebody from being murdered, and that was a heroic duty. Hour number 2 coming up on The Larry Elder Show.
Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
The Derek Chauvin trial was for many, many people fraught with rage and sadness and resentment, frustration, apprehension. What's going to happen as the verdict is reached? And yesterday, I think everybody was sort of stunned. I was watching the pundits react with amazement that the jury returned a verdict so quickly. And of course, all the analysts, all the smart kids on TV said, that's not good for Derek Chauvin. And as it turned out, it was not good for Derek Chauvin. Guilty, guilty, guilty. And it sort of feels like America collectively let out a sigh of relief. Heard that metaphor a lot too. You heard that description. And we all know why people were relieved. First of all, millions of Americans legitimately believe that justice was served. But the other reason for the sigh of relief is a little more insidious, a little more nefarious, darker, a little scary. And that is the fact that Americans instinctively knew that if the verdict turned out any other way except guilty, 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 multiple cities would burn.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
I say this, I am looking at it very seriously, beyond seriously. From a legal standpoint, I don't want to really talk about it yet.
Beyond seriously. I'm looking at it beyond seriously. That was the 45th President of the United States being asked about will he run for the White House again for 2024. Put the mics on, gentlemen, and get the headphones on. I'm going to survey the massive team here. It's going to take at least 3 hours to get all the answers in. This is America First on the Salem Radio Network. What does that mean to you?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
Where do you think we are in this country? Where do you think we are, and where do you think we may be going?
We are now with a president who refused to answer the questions straightforwardly as a candidate, who has now made it very clear he's going to make every effort with a high degree, a high probability of success to pack the Supreme Court of the United States. This is something he avoided throughout the campaign. It was not his finest or most candid moment in his campaign, among, I would say, a number of such moments. So I think, this is just the latest development in altering what is America, our government, and the relationship with the governed. It's clear that there's an effort to change the relationship between the governed and the government, to make the government larger and more ubiquitous, if such a thing is imaginable. I think that, in partly, the reason for that, if you will, suspended cognitive realization on the part of the American people is because the national media, it's left-wing, but nonetheless, it is the national media, is not in any way bringing critical judgment or great energy to their responsibilities to be either a watchdog or to challenge power.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
Nancy Pelosi, I think, embodied this best. Do we have that clip of Nancy Pelosi? Yeah. So before I play that clip, Nancy Pelosi was talking about George Floyd. And I want you to think about this deeply. As she says this, she says, "Thank you, George Floyd, for dying." Only a religious person would be thanking somebody for dying if they believed that sacrifice was a martyr for a certain purpose. I kid you not, this is what Nancy Pelosi said. Play tape.
So again, thank you, George Floyd, for sacrificing your life for justice, for being there to call out to your mom. How heartbreaking was that? Call out for your mom. I can't breathe. But because of you, and because of thousands, millions of people around the world who came out for justice, your name will always be synonymous.
So she said that he sacrificed himself, which is a very bizarre way to put it, as if he wanted to die. That is basically the definition of sacrifice, that it's the willing or obedient gesture to inhibit yourself, your freedom, your liberty, your life for a different purpose. Now, maybe Nancy Pelosi misspoke, but this was something that was repeated by many different people, like George Floyd's girlfriend thanked him for dying, saying that he gave his life.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
The inevitable riots that you will have now are based on widespread beliefs that are lies, that are just lies. Thousands of blacks. Watch Ami Horowitz's video in Minneapolis, just up at DennisPrager.com. There's a genocide taking place in America against blacks. It's funny because it's only the left that supports abortion, which takes far more black lives than anything else. I mean, there's no comparison.
Oh, thank you very much, Sage from South Central. 6 minutes after the hour as we continue on The Larry Elder Show. Appreciate you being with us. I am live in the ReliefFactor.com studios of AM 1420 The Answer. That's my home base each and every day at 9 a.m. in Cleveland, Ohio. Thanks again to Gary Wolski and Jason Pappas, who joined us from Columbus and from Northeast Ohio, respectively, in the last segment. I want to pivot now and talk about the national scale of the anger and the divisiveness that is being fostered and fomented by leaders at the very top of the government, between the far left leadership in government and in the mainstream media. It's almost impossible for us to not be divided and for us to not believe that there is a very severe and potentially deadly conflict coming between races in this country. Yesterday, Joe Biden took the occasion of the conviction of Derek Chauvin to recycle his favorite white supremacy themes from his allegedly unifying inaugural speech and campaign rhetoric. I'm quoting Heather MacDonald now in a piece she wrote for the City Journal. Floyd's murder ripped the blinders off of the whole world to see the systemic racism that is a stain on our nation's soul, the knee on the neck of justice for black Americans, the profound fear and trauma, the pain, the exhaustion that black and brown Americans experience every single day, Biden said from the White House. The summer of protest had sent the message, according to Biden, enough of the senseless killings. Again, those were the words of Heather MacDonald as she tried to shine the light of truth on all of this. And that is, the exact opposite of what Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and so many others in the far left reaches of our government are doing right now. I asked Heather MacDonald to come on and talk to us about this, about the reality of the big lie, and I'm very pleased to welcome her to the program now. Heather MacDonald, fellow with the Manhattan Institute, author of the best-selling The War on Cops, and her latest book is The Diversity Delusion. Heather, thank you for joining us on The Larry Elder Show. How are you?
Well, thank you so much for inviting me, Bob. It's great to be with you again.
It's a pleasure to talk with you always. You bring so much information and so many facts to these conversations that people just cannot defeat with their emotions. Let's start with what I just read from your piece in the City Journal, in which Joe Biden declared that the conviction of Derek Chauvin actually proves that not only policing, but this country overall is systemically racist, that black and brown people just do not have a shot in this country on a daily basis. They're looking over their shoulders. They're always, fearing for their lives because of the systemic racism of this country. How do you respond to that?
Bob, if you're suggesting that Biden is engaged in a logical incoherence, shame on you. Of course it is. It's unbelievable. The very fact you have the entire state of Minnesota's bar, private bar, and government determined to convict Chauvin, whether rightly or wrongly, we'll leave that aside. You had an entire national establishment claiming that this was, in fact, a racist murder, and you had Chauvin now going to be locked away, possibly for most of his remaining life. And yet, we're still supposed to believe that the system is biased against blacks. It is a narrative that is utterly impervious to facts. I turn on CNN and MSNBC every day, and my mouth hangs open at the just shamelessness with which people are denying the reality. Let's just start with something more limited than this blanket, universal indictment of white supremacy. Let's look at the policing charges. The fact of the matter is that policing today is driven by one thing, and that's crime rates. As long as black crime remains as elevated as it is, at sometimes 20 to 50 times higher rates of commission of violent street crime in cities, whether it's New York or Chicago, compared to whites, The police are going to be more often in black neighborhoods interacting with violent, armed, and resisting suspects. That is what determines officer use of force. It is not skin color. It is the incidence of crime, and it is not allowed to talk about that.
And Heather, when you talk about, the officers being in these neighborhoods, these high crime neighborhoods, it's not because they're just going there for kicks. They're being called there. And who are they being called there? Who are all of these 911 calls and then thus these radio calls to be send officers into these high crime areas? Who are they coming from?
Absolutely. The officers hope against hope that for once when they get there, they will be given the description of a white suspect. It almost never happens. But the callers, the victims and the witnesses are themselves overwhelmingly black. In New York City, for example, blacks are 23% of the population. They commit about 3/4 of all shootings. How do we know that? It's not the police that are making these up. It's the victims of and witnesses to these insane, retaliatory, mindless, grotesque drive-by shootings who are themselves overwhelmingly black. And yet, today there's an op-ed by a professor at an Ohio law school just outright denying that there's a higher black crime rate. The bodies speak for themselves. Blacks die of homicide at 13 times the rate between the ages of 10 and 43 of whites and Hispanics combined. 13 times the rate. The bodies do not lie. Those black homicide victims are not being killed by the cops. They're not being killed by whites. They're being killed by other blacks. And yet we brush that under the rug because it is so important to destroy this country by tearing down every institution, by calling those institutions white or by calling individuals white. As I say in the piece, I give the name White House about another year. You can ask your viewers, to have a sort of a contest to rename it. Somebody suggested the George Floyd House. We'll see, but it's not going to, believe me, because to be called white today is to have a scarlet letter of shame and guilt painted on you.
Well, Heather, we're talking with Heather MacDonald. She is she is a fellow, at the Manhattan Institute, the author of the best-selling The War on Cops. Your latest book is The Diversity Delusion. And that's defined as the belief that underrepresented ideological, gender, and racial minorities are victims of interminable oppression and emotional trauma, most often on college campuses. So let's go bigger picture here than just crime rates, and the belief that black and brown people have to run for their lives every time they go to the grocery store because of the racist cops and racist white people out there. That's only part of the diversity delusion. Tell us the rest of it.
Well, it's hilarious. I mean, this whole safetyism ethic we're getting now of people saying I'm so fragile, the newspaper room reporters in their newsrooms having editors fired because running an op-ed, Tom Cotton's op-ed on a military response to the riots puts them at lethal risk of their lives. This begins in the campus. Several years ago, you had black Princeton students chanting, saying, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, a phrase first used by Fannie Lou Hamer, who was the child of a sharecropper. Growing up, she was beaten, trying to vote. For any student at Princeton to say, oh, I'm so exhausted by my oppression is ludicrous. But this narcissistic self-pity and believing that one is a victim and at risk of one's life has jumped out of the academy. It drives a lot of the coronavirus response as well, and it is a joke. And yet, the mainstream establishment takes it seriously. I think it's a feminized culture that's coming out of the university, taking over our institutions, that is risk averse. We see the complete betrayal of any kind of rational policymaking when it comes to coronavirus, but it all begins with the race narrative. And the fact of the matter is that Americans turn their eyes away from that dysfunctional inner city culture that is not universal. Of course, as you say, Bob, the people who want the police are the good, hardworking, bourgeois, law-abiding residents of inner-city neighborhoods who beg for more police protection. I have never been to a police community meeting in central Harlem, south central L.A., south Chicago, where I've heard people say, we have too many cops. Instead, it's always, we want more cops, we want more enforcement, get the dealers off the streets. Their voices are ignored by the mainstream media.
Well, that's the reason I asked you that question earlier, because here in Cleveland, where I live, they had a record number of homicides last year, despite population being some 300,000 less than it was 25 years ago. And over 90% of the calls that come into 911 asking for police are coming from African Americans, and they're being menaced by other African Americans. So, you know, I don't know what the op-ed that you mentioned in an Ohio paper or from an Ohio professor says, but you cannot deny those statistics. Heather MacDonald, I've got a lot more for you. I'm going to ask you to hold on for us during this break, or actually we'll get right back in touch with you, and we'll continue with Heather MacDonald from the Manhattan Institute as we continue on The Larry Elder Show.
Trending now on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
Joe Manchin, Senator Joe, did a tele-town hall yesterday about West Virginians and why they vote Republicans. Listen to this, cut 18.
People asked me one time, they said, what happened to West Virginia? How come West Virginia's changed from a Democrat state to a Republican state? How did that happen in the quickest amount of time that we've ever seen? I said, I can tell you how West Virginia feels. We feel like the returning Vietnam veteran. We've done every dirty job you've asked us to do. We never questioned. We did it and performed well. And now all of a sudden we're not good enough, we're not clean enough, we're not green enough, we're not smart enough. You want to know why they quit voting for Democrats? That's the reason.
That's exactly. The entire country knows that a handful of elite Democrats think they're morons.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
The Derek Chauvin trial was for many, many people fraught with rage and sadness and resentment, frustration, apprehension. What's going to happen as the verdict is reached? And yesterday, I think everybody was sort of stunned. I was watching the pundits react with amazement that the jury returned a verdict so quickly. And of course, all the analysts, all the smart kids on TV said, that's not good for Derek Chauvin. And as it turned out, it was not good for Derek Chauvin. Guilty, guilty, guilty. And it sort of feels like America collectively let out a sigh of relief. Heard that metaphor a lot too. You heard that description. And we all know why people were relieved. First of all, millions of Americans legitimately believe that justice was served. But the other reason for the sigh of relief is a little more insidious, a little more nefarious, darker, a little scary. And that is the fact that Americans instinctively knew that if the verdict turned out any other way except guilty, 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 multiple cities would burn.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
I say this, I am looking at it very seriously, beyond seriously. From a legal standpoint, I don't want to really talk about it yet.
Beyond seriously. I'm looking at it beyond seriously. That was the 45th President of the United States being asked about will he run for the White House again for 2024. Put the mics on, gentlemen, and get the headphones on. I'm going to survey the massive team here. It's going to take at least 3 hours to get all the answers in. This is America First on the Salem Radio Network. What does that mean to you?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
Where do you think we are in this country? Where do you think we are, and where do you think we may be going?
We are now with a president who refused to answer the questions straightforwardly as a candidate, who has now made it very clear he's going to make every effort with a high probability of success to pack the Supreme Court of the United States. This is something he avoided throughout the campaign.
All right, 20 minutes past the hour, we continue our discussion of race and policing and racist policing, if you are to listen to the far left, because that's the only kind that there is. And we are talking with Heather MacDonald. Heather MacDonald is a fellow with the Manhattan Institute. She is an expert in this area. She has been studying and crunching federal crime statistics as well as state and city crime statistics for many, many years, and that's why she had such a phenomenal bestseller called The War on Cops a few years ago. Her latest book is The Diversity Delusion. And Heather, thank you for staying with us for another segment. I often on my radio program refer to your Prager University video that you did a few years ago, in which you also kind of talked about some of those numbers. I want to play a short clip of that and ask you if this is still accurate.
In 2014, over 6,000 blacks were murdered, more than all white and Hispanic homicide victims combined. Who is killing them? Not the police and not white civilians, but other blacks. In fact, a police officer is 18 and a half times more likely to be killed by a black male than an unarmed black male is to be killed by a police officer. If the police ended all use of lethal force tomorrow, it would have a negligible impact on the black death by homicide rate.
Heather MacDonald, that stat that you quoted in that PragerU video from a few years ago, is that always stuck with me. Is that still accurate? 18 and a half more times likely that a police officer will be killed by a black suspect than an unarmed black person will to be killed by an officer?
Sometimes the ratio is 30 times. It's between 18 and a half and 30 times. What's not accurate in that PragerU video anymore is by now, then it was 6,000 blacks are killed every year. Last year, we're probably going to have about 8,500 blacks who are killed, because last year, thanks to the rioting, the further demeaning and disparaging and hatred directed at cops, the U.S. saw the largest percentage increase in homicide in the nation's history, and the victims are, again, overwhelmingly black, including 46 black children who were gunned down in their beds, in their front porches, at the barbecues, at birthday parties last year by these insane drive-by shootings that have never been protested. None of those black children have ever had their names said by a Black Lives Matter activist.
How much blame do you ascribe, Heather MacDonald, to the media for all of this? You know, the narrative, the big lie, the diversity delusion, and the idea that blacks and brown people are under so much more oppression and so much more likely to be taken out by police. Because all of the statistics you quoted for us in the last segment, along with the one that you just told us now, I feel like if they were on CNN every night or on MSNBC and on the major networks, I feel like if people knew the truth here, we could end some of this. Why is there no intention on the part of the media to broadcast the truth that you're talking about with these numbers?
Well, yes, the media are absolutely complicit in this. So is academia. So is more and more mainstream institutions. They are left-wing. They are the products of the academy themselves. They are committed to the narrative of enduring white supremacy. And the rest of America, I think, is just terrified that the academic skills gap, the crime gap, is never going to close, and so they are preemptively putting out there the only allowable explanation for ongoing racial disparities, which is white racism. Nobody has the courage. They somehow feel it is improper and may lead to improper conclusions, to be honest about the dysfunctional inner city culture that is killing blacks at a rate, as I say, 13 times higher than whites.
That's an astounding statistic in and of itself. Heather, the gentleman whose program I'm hosting tonight, Larry Elder, one of his catchphrases is, "We've got a country to save." And I love that. I love coming on and doing his show and joining in that effort. But I have to tell you, sometimes I get dispirited and I feel like it's beyond saving. And the reason why is some of what you're talking about. Police cannot be police. Police are afraid to go into areas and be active anymore. It's going to lead to more deaths. As you said, the vast majority of them will be minorities. And I just talked to two police officers who were members of the FOP an hour ago, and I asked them, if you had it to do over again, would you get into it now if you were age 22 and starting out? And they said, absolutely not. We've got people retiring at extraordinary rates. We got academy classes that are empty. Nobody wants to be a cop anymore. So how do we resolve all of this? How do we save the country, as Larry says, when we cannot rely on a police force anymore?
Well, we are playing with fire. I mean, the riots that we saw, and we all know that that jury was under enormous pressure to convict. If there had not been convictions on all three counts, America's cities would have burned to the ground. And that is going to be the truth. That is going to be the case now with any police officer in the future who is indicted for use of force. So that is a further disincentive for people to go into the profession, and if they're there, to be proactive. We're not going to get any more police officers, but it's worse than that. I mean, the justification for rioting and anarchy, we are playing with fire. We sort of think everything's going to come out okay. It's not. You cannot excuse the social animosity of people burning down police precincts, looting stores, and yet again, America is unwilling to have a single standard of behavior. It is so terrified of being called a racist that it makes excuses all the time for bad black behavior, which does not do blacks any favor. And there's thousands of blacks who say, no, we believe that we should all live up to the same bourgeois norms, but the country at large is not willing to do that. And if this anarchy continues, it's not going to stop until white children start getting shot. And the crime is spreading out of the inner city via carjackings. You have people, whites to be honest, that are getting dragged in their cars in Chicago, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C. That's going to spread. When these drive-by shootings start spreading, that may get the attention of establishment whites. It's also going to lead to an even greater white flight from cities. They're not going to stay around and build communities and be diverse together. It's assumed that those drive-by shootings, that's something that happens to blacks, but we're not going to care about it until it happens to us. But until then, this left-wing media that purports to care about black lives, it's all BS. I mean, the Black Lives Matter movement is BS. I hear people now every day shedding crocodile tears about, they're killing us every day, and why do we have to bury another black child? They have never shed a tear over these black kids that are killed. It's all hypocrisy. And I will say this as well, Bob. The sense that people have that we're in an epidemic of racially biased police shootings of black males is an optical illusion. It is based on precisely that selective press that you decry. The press only covers police shootings of blacks. There are twice as many whites who were shot fatally by the cops. If the media covered those exclusively, we think we're in an epidemic of police shootings of whites. This is completely a media creation that has no connection to reality. There were 18 unarmed blacks fatally shot last year by the police. That represents 0.2% of the 8,500 blacks who were killed, and I can't even do the math on what percentage it represents of the 40 million black Americans in this country.
Best evidence of the point you just made is of the twice as many whites that were shot as blacks. Name one of them. Most people cannot name one white name, but you can name almost all of the black names because they get all of the coverage, unfortunately. Heather MacDonald, thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
The Derek Chauvin trial was for many, many people fraught with rage and sadness and resentment, frustration, apprehension. What's going to happen as the verdict is reached? And yesterday, I think everybody was sort of stunned. I was watching the pundits react with amazement that the jury returned a verdict so quickly. And of course, all the analysts, all the smart kids on TV said, that's not good for Derek Chauvin. And as it turned out, it was not good for Derek Chauvin. Guilty, guilty, guilty. And it sort of feels like America collectively let out a sigh of relief. Heard that metaphor a lot too. You heard that description. And we all know why people were relieved. First of all, millions of Americans legitimately believe that justice was served. But the other reason for the sigh of relief is a little more insidious, a little more nefarious, darker, a little scary. And that is the fact that Americans instinctively knew that if the verdict turned out any other way except guilty, 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 multiple cities would burn.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
I say this, I am looking at it very seriously, beyond seriously. From a legal standpoint, I don't want to really talk about it yet.
Beyond seriously. I'm looking at it beyond seriously. That was the 45th President of the United States being asked about will he run for the White House again for 2024. Put the mics on, gentlemen, and get the headphones on. I'm going to survey the massive team here. It's going to take at least 3 hours to get all the answers in. This is America First on the Salem Radio Network. What does that mean to you?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
Where do you think we are in this country? Where do you think we are, and where do you think we may be going?
We are now with a president who refused to answer the questions straightforwardly as a candidate, who has now made it very clear he's going to make every effort with a high degree, a high probability of success to pack the Supreme Court of the United States. This is something he avoided throughout the campaign. It was not his finest or most candid moment in his campaign, among, I would say, a number of such moments. So I think, this is just the latest development in altering what is America, our government, and the relationship.
Yes, indeed, good advice. 27 minutes before the top of the hour, now 26. I like to be accurate and factual when I sit in for Larry Elder. Bob France sitting in for Larry live in Cleveland, Ohio. The AM 1420, The Answer, ReliefFactor.com studios. I want to remind you that this talk show, The Larry Elder Show, and I fully support and agree with this, by the way, we want you to know the truth about the Georgia election law and why we support it despite efforts to smear it with untruths about its content. As long as public companies are getting involved in an effort to hurt the state of Georgia, our company wants to stand by the truth and correct the record. We also believe that Major League Baseball, Delta, Coca-Cola, other businesses, they've been badly misled about the new Georgia law and should act to correct the record before consumers decide to fly other airlines, drink other beverages, and stay away from the ballparks this summer. We believe in voting security and the expanded voting access provided by the new Georgia law, and we urge you to join us in doing so. Sign our petition at the top of the LarryElder.com page. You will see the Stand With Georgia banner, and by all means, please let us share your opinion with them. All right, the guest portion of the program is over. I had a couple of great guests, actually 3 great guests. The rest of the program is yours, and I invite you now at 888-971-SAGE. That's 888-971-7243. Do you have a response to what you just heard from Heather MacDonald? Heather is just a tremendous presenter of facts. She doesn't rely on emotion. She looks at the FBI crime data better than anybody, maybe anybody. And I know a lot of very smart people who do this, but maybe better than anybody. She looks at the Department of Justice, crime statistics. She looks at state departments of justice, crime statistics, police statistics in the biggest cities in this country. And she crunches all the numbers, and it's not close, right? It's not close. It's not ambiguous. What she says is true, and these facts don't give a rip about your feelings. And yet, despite Heather being, again, very dispassionate and very, always composed, she got a little fired up there. She's getting tired of the lie because it's destroying the country in which she and we live. She's getting tired of the big lie that this country is systemically racist. All this is an attempt by the Marxists who have been just living kind of in the shadows and waiting for their chance to destroy this great capitalist republic. They've been waiting for their chance, and they see that it's here now. And that's why they're jumping. They're jumping on this racial division. They're jumping on the lie of systemic racism, and black and brown people have to fear for their lives. If black and brown people have to fear for their lives so much every day in this country, why are there a million of them trying to cross our border illegally to get here? Anybody ever wonder that? Why, if you are a would-be immigrant from Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, I don't care, or whether you're coming from another part of the country, why, if you are a person who might be considered black or brown or BIPOC or whatever, why would you want to come to this systemically racist country where you're going to dodge the bullets of dirty racist cops every day? She got a little fired up. And I got to tell you, I was glad to hear it, because I'm fired up too. I'm tired of sitting around silently and letting the lie be told. I will preach these numbers that Heather compiled, that the FBI puts out. They're available for everybody to see. It's not a secret. I will preach them. I will play them. I will repeat them on the air, online, every day that I get a chance to, because the mainstream media will not. And that's a tragedy. No, it's worse than a tragedy, to be 100% honest with you. It's criminal. It's criminal. If the news directors at CBS, NBC, ABC, MSNBC, CNN, and so forth would instruct their anchors and hosts to put these truths out there about black crime, white crime, police involvement in black and white crime, interactions, use of force, number of cases, and all the way down the line. Publish and broadcast the names of white victims in police shootings, not just black ones. I mean, look, and I'm trying to find a really good analogy here with cars. Maybe I'll think about it during the break. But the bottom line is, you have more white people being shot by cops in this country every year than there are black people, but you don't know any of their names because they're never reported. But when you do hear the names of the black people, you say it happened again and again and again and again, and you think it's happening constantly. It's a lie. And the truth needs to be told. And if the news directors at those networks won't do it, I'll do it. Larry will do it. We'll do it all across the Salem Radio Network. I promise you that. We'll be right back.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
Hatred of the whites. Is it because of slavery? And my argument is that it is not. Why is Shakespeare hated? Did he have slaves? Right? That should do it on its own. Every nation had slavery. Are they all hated? Whites are hated for creating America in the West. That's why they want to bring down. They use white hatred as the cover for West hatred. Remember when President Trump gave this magnificent talk in Poland? Magnificent. On behalf of Western civilization. New York Times declared it a white supremacist talk. That's right. It makes perfect sense. They hate the West. The left hates the West. The left hates order. The left hates capitalism. I point out in my column that Hitler hated capitalism as well. Major work. I read the entire book, a new biography of Hitler, by a professor at Cambridge. So that's a good credential for those of you who want credentials. And it's a lot about his hatred of capitalism. Remember, Nazism stands for National Socialism.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about is Brent Griffiths in his Business Insider newsletter this morning finally came up with a number of aid for in the Biden stimulus package. The giveaway to New York City is $5.6 billion. How's that going to play in the Arizona, Georgia, New Hampshire Senate elections where Democrats are on their back foot?
It's not going to play well, especially when New York City is doing things like giving large amounts to people who are undocumented, illegal immigrants, and just using this aid money in ways that are not permitted by, or that are not done by the federal government.
You can't work for ICE or CPB anymore. There's a memo out. You cannot use the term illegal immigrant. Now, I've always preferred undocumented, since it is more comprehensive as to what we're talking about. But they have outlawed the use of illegal alien. So you're kind of outlawed, Byron.
At a congressional appearance by Alejandro Mayorkas, the head of Homeland Security,
Bob Frantz sitting in here in Cleveland, Ohio, the ReliefFactor.com studios. Dial 888-971-SAGE. That's 888-971-7243, and we'll put you up and on the radio here. But real quick, before you do, here is the Columbus Council member I was talking with Heather about earlier, and also Gary Wolski. The city of Columbus, Ohio, where, of course, we had the shooting of Micaiah Bryant as she tried to stab another teenager to death on Tuesday. And, of course, Lebron James said, "You're next," about that police officer. There's all kinds of reactions, but this is one of the more interesting ones. This is the type of mindset. Earlier in the program, I said, this is the voice of stupid. This is what stupid sounds like, and I played you Joy Behar. Now I want to play you a Columbus, Ohio City Council member named Shayla Favor.
We need to invest in non-police or other community-trained modes of policing, unarmed crisis response. And so I continue to say I can't help but think what would happen if we had social workers present, if we had community-based interventionists present. Now, currently, currently in Columbus, Ohio, we do have a mobile crisis response team. And that's where a mental health specialist is paired with an officer and shows up on scene. And
you know what would have happened if you'd have had social workers on scene or crisis intervention specialists on scene? You know what would have happened to them? They would have gotten wet with blood. Okay? That's what would have happened to them. Because they weren't stopping a woman from stabbing another woman, or I should say a teen, in mid-murder. They weren't going to talk them down. Hey, hold on a second there, Micaiah. Hold on there a second. Before you take that arm that you have cocked back, that has a butcher knife in that hand, before you plunge it forward, let's talk about what got us to this situation. Can we talk? I would love to really, maybe kind of figure out what's going through your mind right now. Is there something this girl has done to wrong you? Let's talk about other solutions for this. Let's have an intervention. I mean, honestly, what are these people thinking? There is a reason why cops are armed with lethal weapons, because criminals use lethal weapons. And a criminal who is involved in the commission of an attempted or a successful murder isn't going to be talked to while she's in mid-stabbing motion. The only person that's going to stop her in that point in time is an armed police officer. Now, if she survives, and then you want to have a conversation with her, social worker, be my guest. But when a violent fight breaks out and lethal weapons are being used and somebody's about to get murdered, well, you do what the heroic officer named Nicholas Reardon did. You save lives. Long Beach, California. This is Jerry on the Larry Elder Show. Jerry, welcome. It's Bob France sitting in. Go right ahead.
Well, Bob, glad you're in today. Boy, missed the stage, but you know what? You're at the top. You're at the top.
Thank you.
For one of his replacements. I like you.
That.
Hey, listen. Hey, this is what I don't get. Hello?
Yeah, I'm listening to
Hello?
you, Jerry. Go
you
right
there?
ahead. Yeah, I'm listening to you.
Something popped up. Hey, okay, why do all these people on all the TV shows, they go, the cops are racist? Well, first of all, you haven't proved that, number one, but you call that anyway, and then they use structural racism or systemic racism. But they don't identify it, like President Biden. He blathers this stuff out like it's, penny candy. But no one has yet to pin him down. Well, Mr. President, what do you mean by systemic or structural racism? And I guarantee you, his stuttering will kick in.
Well, there's no doubt about that. Jerry, you're right. But here's the thing. What they have done is they have created an environment where they don't have to explain specifics. They say it as if it's an accepted reality. They say it as if it's a matter of fact. You know what I mean? Biden, Kamala Harris, every Democrat in the Congress, Mayor Ted Ginther, the Democrat mayor of Columbus, Ohio. They say things as a matter of fact, as if, this is another example of systemic racism that we have to fight back against, as if it's not like, hey, is there something in society and in our social constructs that could lead to this? They don't ask the question about, quote, systemic racism. They just say it like, this is a fact. Everybody accepts it. Now let's see what we can do about it. And when you do it that way, and you have everybody unified doing it that way, when you have the collusion, the extraordinary collusion between the DNC and every leftist Democrat in elected office and every leftist Democrat on television and in the mainstream media, you get away with it. You don't have to explain it. And as a matter of fact, what they have done through critical race theory is they have also managed to convince you that if a white person questions systemic racism, or pushes back or debates on systemic racism, it's an example of, you got it, systemic racism. White people can't accept the reality of their own racism. It's in their DNA. It's not even necessarily something they consciously know about. Here's an example. Look at somebody questioning the existence of systemic racism. That's clearly because of their systemic racism. They're questioning their white privilege because they don't even recognize their own white privilege, which makes it an example of their white privilege. Do you see what they've done? They've made it impossible to discuss these things rationally or common sensibly. They make it, they have nothing to prove. They just say this, if we repeat it often enough in enough channels between mainstream media, social media, and elected officials, then we will just have to buy it. Dallas, Texas. Chris, you're on the Larry Elder Show. Chris, go right ahead. I've got a minute for you.
Thank you, Bob. There's a passage in Proverbs that says, if a ruler hearkens unto lies, all of his servants become wicked. We as the American people must overcome and be aware and cognizant. Go ahead.
No, I'm listening to you, Chris. Go ahead, buddy.
Okay, we've got to be aware that we are in a war with what the good versus evil, evil versus good, and the political warfare of the Democratic Party against the American people is exactly that. It's like you were saying a moment ago, Bob, that the Marxists are jumping at this opportunity because they planned for it, they prepared for it, and they see it as a moment of weakness.
You're exactly right. This is what thank you very much for the phone call, Chris. I appreciate it. This is exactly what they've been waiting for, and they're not going to let this opportunity go by.
Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
That confirms what we all sort of suspect. America's not in a good place right now. We're just not. I mean, here's a headline you won't see anywhere. Chauvin found guilty. The system worked. No. The progressives don't like that. AOC doesn't approve of that. AOC doesn't approve of that at all. In fact, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez seems very disappointed that Derek Chauvin got the maximum amount of guilt that he could have possibly received at yesterday's trial.
This verdict is not justice. Frankly, I don't even think we call it full accountability because there are multiple officers that were there. It wasn't just Derek Chauvin. And I also don't want this moment to be framed as this system working, because it's not working. And that's what creates a lot of complexity in this moment.
That's a lot of complexity in that, young lady. A lot of complexity in this moment. Justice was not served. In fact, there wasn't even any accountability. And if that wasn't a goofy enough take for you, how about Nancy Pelosi? Nancy Pelosi actually looked up into the heavens and thanked George Floyd for dying.
Thank you, George Floyd.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
You hear a lot of people talk about end of days and whether we are preparing for the raptures. They can be easily forgiven because of all that is happening in our life. This country alone, don't look to the world, but to this country alone, we are watching the American heritage turned upside down. We're watching illegal immigrants given money by a government that denies it to those who are hardworking Americans with families to support. We are looking at a president who wouldn't answer a question.
5 minutes before the top of the hour, time for a couple of calls before that top. Let's go as we continue. By the way, Bob France sitting in for the Sage, Larry Elder, if you just turned your radio on. Let's go to Utica, New York. And Rich, you are on the Larry Elder Show. Hi, Rich, go ahead.
Hey, Bob, how you doing? Hey,
Good,
just a couple of thoughts here. I was thinking, the police, they don't tell LeBron how to dribble a ball, and they don't tell Joy how to, conduct yourself on her show. Yet they seem to think that they're experts in how they should conduct addressing their police calls. So my recommendation would be this. Have Joy and LeBron, get them in the patrol car and have them go on some police calls and show the police how it's done. I think that's what we need to know. Don't you think? What do you think?
I do, Rich. And you know what makes me sad is that, because you're right, by the way, ride-alongs are available, especially to these people all the time. Police are more than happy to show them the real life. And we're not just talking about in a suburb where there's not going to be any action except somebody got pulled over for for running a stop sign. Put them in the inner city. Put them in the urban centers where most of the crime calls come in. Let them see what it's like. What makes me sad, Rich, is I have not heard from Shaquille O'Neal very much since all of this, anti-cop stuff started coming. Do you remember that during Shaq's playing days, he actually became a deputized sheriff or a police officer in Miami Beach or somewhere? He is a strong supporter of police. Huge.
Yeah, that's all.
He became. Go ahead.
No, but I'm telling you, let the experts show us how it's done.
No, I'm with you. I'm with you. Yeah, you made that point, and it's right, Rich. It's a good one. I just want to. My point to that is, I would love for there to be a rebuttal to the LeBron James of the world. You know what I mean? This is what I'm trying to say. I agree with you. You've made your point about that. I would love to see them go and do some ride-alongs and show them how to do it, or in other words, see the real reality of what cops face. But I'm looking for a major celebrity star like Shaquille O'Neal to rebut LeBron James. And Shaq has been awfully quiet, unless I'm just missing it because I don't watch the NBA anymore. So I don't watch the TNT shows that he's on. But Shaq has always been a massive supporter of law enforcement. But now that law enforcement has been identified as public enemy number one by the NBA and many other celebrity figures, I wonder if he has been kind of shamed into silence. I wonder if he's fearful of cancel culture, because it would be great if Shaquille O'Neal could tell LeBron James the truth about policing. All right. My name is Bob France. I'm so glad to be with you. I've got another hour to go on the Larry Elder Show. If you're on hold, stay there. If you're not on hold, get there, and we're coming to you.
Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
The Derek Chauvin trial was for many, many people fraught with rage and sadness and resentment, frustration, apprehension. What's going to happen as the verdict is reached? And yesterday, I think everybody was sort of stunned. I was watching the pundits react with amazement that the jury returned a verdict so quickly. And of course, all the analysts, all the smart kids on TV said, that's not good for Derek Chauvin. And as it turned out, it was not good for Derek Chauvin. Guilty, guilty, guilty. And it sort of feels like America collectively let out a sigh of relief. Heard that metaphor a lot too. You heard that description. And we all know why people were relieved. First of all, millions of Americans legitimately believe that justice was served. But the other reason for the sigh of relief is a little more insidious, a little more nefarious, darker, a little scary. And that is the fact that Americans instinctively knew that if the verdict turned out any other way except guilty, 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 multiple cities would burn.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
I say this, I am looking at it very seriously, beyond seriously. From a legal standpoint, I don't want to really talk about it yet.
Beyond seriously. I'm looking at it beyond seriously. That was the 45th President of the United States being asked about will he run for the White House again for 2024. Put the mics on, gentlemen, and get the headphones on. I'm going to survey the massive team here. It's going to take at least 3 hours to get all the answers in. This is America First on the Salem Radio Network. What does that mean to you?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
Where do you think we are in this country? Where do you think we are, and where do you think we may be going?
We are now with a president who refused to answer the questions straightforwardly as a candidate, who has now made it very clear he's going to make every effort with a high degree, a high probability of success to pack the Supreme Court of the United States. This is something he avoided throughout the campaign. It was not his finest or most candid moment in his campaign, among, I would say, a number of such moments. So I think, this is just the latest development in altering what is America, our government, and the relationship with the governed. It's clear that there's an effort to change the relationship between the governed and the government, to make the government larger and more ubiquitous, if such a thing is imaginable. I think that, and partly the reason for that, if you will, suspended cognitive realization on the part of the American people is because the national media, it's left wing, but nonetheless, it is the national media, is not in any way bringing critical judgment or great energy to their responsibilities to be either a watchdog or to challenge power.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
Nancy Pelosi, I think, embodied this best. Do we have that clip of Nancy Pelosi? Yeah. So before I play that clip, Nancy Pelosi was talking about George Floyd. And I want you to think about this deeply. As she says this, she says, "Thank you, George Floyd, for dying." Only a religious person would be thanking somebody for dying if they believed that sacrifice was a martyr for a certain purpose. I kid you not, this is what Nancy Pelosi said. Play tape.
So again, thank you, George Floyd, for sacrificing your life for justice, for being there to call out to your mom. How heartbreaking was that? Call out for your mom. I can't breathe. But because of you, and because of thousands, millions of people around the world who came out for justice, your name will always be synonymous.
So she said that he sacrificed himself, which is a very bizarre way to put it, as if he wanted to die. That is basically the definition of sacrifice, that it's the willing or obedient gesture to inhibit yourself, your freedom, your liberty, your life for a different purpose. Now, maybe Nancy Pelosi misspoke, but this was something that was repeated by many different people, like George Floyd's girlfriend thanked him for dying, saying that he gave his life.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Dennis Prager Show.
The inevitable riots that you will have now are based on widespread beliefs that are lies, that are just lies. Thousands of blacks. Watch Ami Horowitz's video in Minneapolis, just up at DennisPrager.com. There's a genocide taking place in America against blacks.
Really, I mean, that's the only reason I do it. Other shows will call me and say, "Hey, can you sit in for Dennis?" Or can you sit in for Hugh? Or can you sit in for Dr. G? And I hear all the maybe, but we bring the funk. And if they say no, you can't have the funk on this show, then I don't often do it. I mean, sometimes I'll bring my own, I suppose, but I know that when I sit in for Larry Elder, I'm going to get the funk. DJ Sean is always going to bring the funk for me, and I absolutely love it. I feel young. I feel younger when I do this show. It's weird because Larry's older than me. Not much, but Larry's older than me. But it makes me feel younger when I hear the music on the show. Welcome. My name is Bob Francis. You just heard from the Sage. It is the final hour of the Larry Elder Show. I'm coming to you live from the ReliefFactor.com studios here in Cleveland, Ohio. AM 1420. The Answer is my home base. Ohio's kind of the epicenter now of the new race versus racism or racist police narrative that's going on. And true to form, Lebron James, who loves to call himself just a kid from Akron, weighed in on this as he decided that a police officer who was called to the scene because of threats of stabbing, that's what the 911 call showed in Columbus, Ohio 2 days ago. A police officer received that radio call, was dispatched to the location where violence was occurring and stabbing was imminent, showed up to see one very large 16-year-old, as it turned out, I wouldn't have guessed that, black girl chasing another girl with a butcher knife. And as she went to stab her, the other girl fell to the ground. It was the best fall she ever made because it's kept her clear of the blade. With her on the ground, the 16-year-old, who we now know as Micaiah Bryant, turned and went after her second victim, who did not have the ability to fall to the ground because she was pinned up against a parked car. And as Bryant reached back with her butcher knife in her right hand, the police officer shot her and stopped that murder from taking place. Let me say that again. The police officer stopped a murder that was in progress. In the process, the suspect died. That's the actual narrative here. Rather than the narrative that the left is giving you, that the media is giving you, that the Democratic politicians, both in Columbus, in the state of Ohio, really and all throughout the country, they're giving you, that the celebrities, the sports world, Hollywood, that they're giving you. The narrative they're giving you is police officers shot and killed a 16-year-old black girl. End of story. The reality is, police officers stopped the murder of two black girls. And in the course of stopping the suspect died. LeBron James took that opportunity, the kid from Akron, to take to Twitter and declare, "You're next." Hashtag accountability. And that was over the photograph of the officer involved, Nicholas Reardon. To say that this was reckless is an understatement. To say that this is illegal is perhaps more accurate. That's what Gary Wolski told me. I had Gary on, who's the president of the Ohio FOP, earlier tonight. He said that what LeBron James tweeted is indeed a public threat, and it is illegal. It is unlikely anybody will do anything about it. But Brandon Tatum, a former police officer, had something to say about it.
LeBron James is living on a high horse. He's in a multi-million-dollar house living around nothing but white people. He is not affected by none of this violence. He could care less. And at the drop of a dime, he'll have white officers at his house doing investigations on false claims if there is some. So and these wealthy people like the BLM co-founder living in $1 million houses, they don't care. They just want to push a virtue signal because they have nothing better to do. They're not educated enough to look at things from both sides, and they continue to want to push a narrative that's just not true. And I really wish they would be held accountable and at least ashamed of what they're doing to our country.
Well, the truth ultimately will win out. Brandon, thank you.
Yeah, that's Brandon Tatum. He was on Laura Ingraham yesterday. And one more piece of audio before I go back to your phone calls at 888-971-SAGE, 888-971-7243. One of the neighbors of Ma'Khia Bryant, who was killed in that attempted murder that she was engaging in, his name is Donovan Brinson, and he's speaking out. And what he says here, I think, is extraordinarily important. This is somebody who obviously knew the deceased and who also was smart enough to recount what he saw accurately and fairly.
He could have either not fired, and the young lady in pink could have got stabbed in the neck and been brutally or fatally injured, and then responded and shot, and that would have been 2 young ladies possibly dead. Or he could have responded the way that he did, and unfortunately, one lady lost her life in an incident that probably could have been avoided.
And I think that is very well thought out and very well argued. He said he could have waited and not shot, and then the 16-year-old Ma'Khia Bryant could have stabbed her victim, killing her. Then he would have shot after the stabbing, and now you've got 2 dead people instead of 1. And God forbid he would have really frozen and not shot her before she stabbed the first victim and let her turn around and go back out to the other one who fell to the ground. Bottom line here is the cop saved at least 1, maybe 2 black lives. And rather than being given praise and a medal for that, he is defending, and others who are reasonable and commonsensible are defending him against attacks from the far left. All right, 888-971-SAGE, 888-971-7243. And I started the show with this 2 hours ago, and I want to hit it again in case you missed that. 2 days before all of this happened, there was another stabbing. And it was also in Ohio, and it was down in Cincinnati. It was in Cincinnati that a 13-year-old black girl was it Saturday or Sunday? It was on the weekend. I apologize. No, it was Monday. It was just the day before. I take that back. It was Monday. On Monday, a 13-year-old black girl in Cincinnati stabbed to death another, actually slashed the right side of her neck, and she bled out. Another 13-year-old black girl. LeBron James didn't mention that. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, none of them, nobody mentioned that. Valerie Jarrett, nobody's talked about the victim in that case. Why? A stabbing victim. If there had been a police officer on that scene, what do you think would have happened if he would have shot the one girl who was stabbing another one to death? Or slashing another one to death? What would the narrative have been? The narrative would have been, oh my gosh, racist white cop shot a 13-year-old black girl. But because there was no cop, the black girl was free to stab and slash and kill another black girl. What's the narrative? No narrative. You know who else hasn't spoken on it? Benjamin Crump, Al Sharpton, Patrice Cullors, anybody from BLM, Jason Johnson on MSNBC. Nobody's talked about the stabbing in Cincinnati on Monday because there's no narrative there. They gain nothing from that. I'm going to give you one more real fast. Then not audio. This is just a tweet that I have to respond to. Bree Newsom is an avid Black Lives Matter supporter. And again, I would always make sure that you understand my point here. I believe Black Lives Matter also. The problem is Black Lives Matter Inc. doesn't. They don't give a rat's rip about black lives. I do. But Bree Newsom, who is with Black Lives Matter Inc., tweeted, condemning Officer Nicholas Reardon for shooting Ma'Khia Bryant in Columbus, Ohio, saying, quote, teenagers have been having fights, including fights involving knives, for eons. We do not need police to address these situations by showing up to the scene and using a weapon against one of the teenagers. Y'all need help. I mean that sincerely. And I have to admit, Bree Newsom gave me some pause. And when I pause and I think back to my, the halcyon days of my younger years, I guess she's right. Teenagers have been having knife fights for eons. I remember being a teenager myself, sometimes wiffle ball in the backyard, maybe hoops down at the local court. Maybe me and the neighborhood friends would ride our bikes down to the park. Sometimes get together, have knife fights with the kids across town. Hell, we'd knife fight until the streetlights came on. Boy, if you'd let us. Had knife fights until Mom yelled for us to come to dinner. I mean, those are great days. Yeah, she's right. And the best part was when you got home for dinner, you got to drink from the garden hose because we had to wash the blood off our knives before dinner. Mom would never let us clean the knives off in the kitchen sink, Had to do it outside. Those were the days. Rinse that blood off, wipe them clean, and then you get to drink it. Remember the water, how water tastes from a garden hose? So good. Oh, good times, my friends. Good times. We'll be back on the Larry Elder Show.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
Why is Shakespeare hated? Did he have slaves? Right? That should do it on its own. Every nation had slavery. Are they all hated? Whites are hated for creating America in the West. That's why they want to bring down. They use white hatred as the cover for West hatred. Remember when President Trump gave this magnificent talk in Poland? Magnificent. On behalf of Western civilization. New York Times declared it a white supremacist talk. That's right. It makes perfect sense. They hate the West.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
I had called it murder from the first day I saw the tape, and so it took a long time to get there, but I can't say I'm surprised. I can't say anyone is surprised, and I know there's a lot of coverage about it, but more of relief for the family of George Floyd than anything else. Still, some politicians said remarkably dumb things, Nancy Pelosi taking the lead. Here's what she said, cut number 17.
Thank you, George Floyd, for sacrificing your life for justice, for being there to call out to your mom. How heartbreaking was that? Call out. All right, to your mom.
George Floyd was murdered. George Floyd was murdered. And Nancy Pelosi attempting to turn a murder into a political statement is, to me, just nuts. He was murdered. He did not make a statement. He did not sacrifice himself. He was murdered. Nancy Pelosi sometimes operates on a plane that I do not understand. I do understand Maxine Waters almost being censored yesterday. Not one Democrat voted to censor her before the verdict came back for encouraging violence in the aftermath of an innocent verdict, which wasn't going to come, but it was still unnecessary for Maxine to come, and she was playing with matches there. Don Lemon on CNN with Wolf, come number 12.
Look at me, everyone. Do you really think Maxine Waters is calling for violence? Maxine Waters is not calling for violence.
Look at me. Yes, she was, and you're never going to win the spelling bee, and everybody knows it, and you'll be canceled as soon as there's a new CNN ownership. And you know it, and I know it. It's because nobody watches your show because you say dumb things like that.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
I was there, front row, in the ellipse, listening to my old boss, President Trump, on January the 6th. Video cut to play cut.
I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
That's what he said, to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. This is what Maxine Waters, who has a track record of doing this, as Congresswoman Green just said, after curfew, not even in her another constituency of her state, in another state, said yesterday. Video cut one, play cut.
Oh, no, not manslaughter. No. This is guilty for murder. I don't know whether it's in the first degree, but as far as I'm concerned, it's first degree murder.
Congresswoman, what happens if we do not get what you just told? What should the people do? What should protesters on the street do?
I didn't hear you.
What happens?
What should protesters do?
Well, we got to stay on the street, and we've got to get...
Now, I can't decide if this is Patrice Rushen and Forget-Me-Not, or if it's Will Smith and the Men in Black, because they stole Will Smith stole that from Patrice Rushen for the movie, which I liked, by the way. Good movie, fun song. 21 minutes after the hour, Bob France in for Larry Elder. It does help to lighten the mood a little bit when you're talking about all the heavy stuff we are right now, but that's where we are. Let's go back to the phones. We're going to go to Sarasota, Florida. Joe, you're on the Larry Elder Show. It's Bob sitting in for Larry. Go right ahead, Joe.
Hello?
Yes, Joe, you're on the air. Joe, can you hear me? Joe, you got to listen through the phone, not through your radio. You might be in a little bit of a delay pattern there, my friend. I'm going to put you on hold. I won't. No, I'm not. I actually hung up on you. I was going to be nice and put him on hold, but I actually hung up on him. You're going to have to call back. Yeah, I guess I did. Leslie is in Texas. What part of Texas, Leslie? Where are you?
North Texas.
North Texas. Welcome to the show, Leslie. Go
Yeah,
right
Northeast Texas.
Okay.
I think I don't know what the real stories and narratives are, but I do think they're getting covered up. Any real ones. Because what I've heard people say is that they get routinely stopped more, not that they routinely get killed more. And I'll hang up and leave that open for discussion.
You're talking about the issue of profiling versus the issue of actual lethal or excessive force.
And I'm not even sure if profiling's right or not, but that discussion doesn't get held too much because we're focused on something. I just did a simple, tiny Google search today and quickly saw the statistics on whites and blacks getting killed by police.
Oh, yeah, they're available, but you have to seek them out, which you did, and good for you. Good on you for that, Leslie. The fact is, though, we need the media to do its job and shout those out and tell everybody, no, this is not some sort of a massive, coordinated assault on black people from police or from white racists or white supremacists. Because here are the real statistics. The fact of the matter is that, and thank you for the call, Leslie, is that 13% of the American population is black, and yet responsible for over 50% of the homicides, over 54% of the violent crimes. And truthfully, when you break that down, because it's very rare, I shouldn't say very rarely, but much less common for them to be females committing these crimes. You narrow that down, and it's actually 6% of the population responsible for over 50% of the murders, and those are African-American males. And the vast majority, over 93% of their victims are whom? African-Americans. We talked at length about this with Heather MacDonald. When police are forced to stand by the wayside and not engage because they're going to be terrified. It's the Ferguson effect that Heather MacDonald once coined. They're going to be terrified to go in and actually get involved in a physical confrontation that might lead to a use of force. When they stand by the wayside, you know who dies? Black people die. That's just the reality of the situation. You heard Heather MacDonald talk about it. 8,500 black homicides last year alone. That's up from an average of 6,000 homicides in the previous several years. 93% of those homicides are being committed by other black people, and cops won't stop it. They can't stop it. And it's only going to get worse. So if black lives truly matter, what is the number one thing that all people of all colors in America should do? They should support the police. Only the police have a chance of saving those black lives that are being taken so frequently. oftentimes by gang members and other derelicts who have no futures, no careers, dropped out of high school, decided to live the drug and the gang life. And that's just the reality of it. There's no, and these facts, again, to borrow the line from Ben Shapiro, they don't care about your feelings. These are realities. It's sad. It's terrible. But it's not fake. You want to save black lives? You really want to prove that Black Lives Matter? Get out there and support police and allow them to do their jobs. Let's go to Girard, Pennsylvania. That's where Matt is on the Larry Elder Show. Hi, Matt. Go right ahead.
Hey, Bob. How are you doing tonight?
Doing well, thank you.
I think it boils down to two different problems we got going on. And I think the first one is that the Biden-Harris administration, for lack of better words, and the lie that they're perpetuating that there's this systemic racism, whites are bad, and the police are out to kill you, is really just Hitler and Stalin 2.0. And I know it sounds crazy at first, but Hitler blamed the faulty economy and everyone else's problems in Germany on the successful, wealthy people, the Jews. And he set all the other races against them. And then once he got rid of them, he got rid of everyone else that was in the way of him accomplishing that, which was the police and everyone else. And he set up the SS, and that was it was anything to get his agenda done. And then the other part to this, I think why it's so rampant and it's getting traction in America, is because that the parents of these children, as they've called them, I'm burying my baby today. Your baby was 20 years old. Your baby was a felon. Your baby was holding a gun to persons' heads and had a warrant out for his arrest. And and that's why he was having confrontation with the police. So if the parents, a mom and a dad, not a dad and a dad, a mom and a mom, but a mother and a father, raise their children to do what's right and to fear and obey God, they wouldn't have a lot of these problems. We wouldn't be talking about any of these right now.
Well, unfortunately, you're right, Matt. I hate to say, the one thing I would caution, I have a real hard time comparing anybody today, even people who I think are doing evil, to Hitler and Stalin. We're talking about people responsible for, tens of millions of deaths collectively, and with movements that are responsible for hundreds of millions of deaths. I don't think they're there yet. Are there elements of fascism and communism to what the current leadership is doing? Yes, I get your point. But I'll stop short of saying they're like Hitler and Stalin. But the last thing you said is spot on. The truth of the matter is, and you were talking about Dante Wright there when you talk, I buried my baby today. Dante Wright is dead for two reasons. Number one, because cops are afraid to cop. And number two, because he did not want to face trial and potentially 20 years for the felony warrant that was out for his arrest for an attempted aggravated armed robbery. That's the bottom line. So he saw an opportunity to flee because the cops weren't being aggressive enough with him and did. So he tried to get away, and then we all know what happened with the tragic mistake. I grabbed the wrong thing off the belt. I grabbed the taser instead of the gun, the gun instead of the taser, and oh my God, I shot him. We all know the rest of that. But the truth of the matter is, yes, he is responsible for his fate. So are all of those protesting and marching today. What do I mean by that? The protesters are making cops afraid to cop. If the police who called in his license plates had called in and got the information about Dante, what's his last name now? I'm forgetting it, for crying out loud. Right, Dante Wright. They called and got his warrant, found out it was a violent felony that he was wanted for. They should have been super aggressive in taking him out of that car and holding him down, maybe even pinning him down with a knee until they got handcuffs on him and then letting him off. But they were afraid to be aggressive with him because with body cameras on, they would have been accused of excessive force. As it turns out, they were gentle with him, so he pushed them away, tried to speed away, and got killed in the process. That's the reality. We'll be back.
Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
It wasn't just Derek Chauvin. And I also don't want this moment to be framed as this system working. because it's not working.
Now, the most depressing part of that, for those of you on radio or podcast you can't tell, is that mountain of gibberish that she just spouted for 30 seconds. Couldn't really make sense of it. There were just like this line of comments, one after the other, of people being like, preach, OMFG, you're amazing, you go girl. I can't really make sense of anything she just said, except for the fact that she is displeased.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
Polk County, Florida Sheriff Grady Judd yesterday, when Ron DeSantis, the governor, signed an anti-riot bill, he said this.
This is what we enjoy in Florida. This is the Florida we know and love. This is what our governor, our speaker, our president, this is what all these law enforcement officers and administrators and sheriffs and police chiefs and their officers do every day. They guarantee an environment where you can come here and have fun. Heck, you can even have more fun. Here's another picture. This is the Florida we know and love. We're a special place. And there are millions and millions of people who like to come here. And quite frankly, we like to have them here. We only want to share one thing as you move in hundreds a day. Welcome to Florida. But don't register to vote and vote the stupid way you did up north. You'll get what they got. There's a reason that this place is fun. There's a reason why we have a 49-year low crime rate.
Now, Ron DeSantis, speaking about the state, was on with Tucker last night.
I think the lockdowns, provided an impetus to be able, because people need an outlet to do things. And so I think some of these states like Minnesota, California, I think the fact that they were locked down and had the opportunity to go out and do stuff, I think that added fuel to the fire of what was going on. So I think the fact that we took a hard line on that, people understood Florida as a law and order state, but also that we were open, I think has been a huge factor in people moving to Florida.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
The Derek Chauvin trial was for many, many people fraught with rage and sadness and resentment, frustration, apprehension. What's going to happen as the verdict is reached? And yesterday, I think everybody was sort of stunned. I was watching the pundits react with amazement that the jury returned a verdict so quickly. And of course, all the analysts, all the smart kids on TV said, that's not good for Derek Chauvin. And as it turned out, it was not good for Derek Chauvin. Guilty, guilty, guilty. And it sort of feels like America collectively let out a sigh of relief.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
Doing our level best to save her, that's for sure. Bob France sitting in for Larry. Thanks for being with us. Part of saving the country is protecting its elections. That's why we support Georgia's new election law. And that's why you should do it too, despite efforts to smear it with untruths about its content. As long as the public companies are getting involved in an effort to hurt Georgia, our company, Salem, wants to stand by the truth and correct the record. We also believe Major League Baseball, Delta, Coca-Cola, the other businesses have been badly misled by the new Georgia law and should act to correct the record themselves before consumers decide to fly other airlines or drink other beverages or stay away from the ballparks this summer. We believe in the voting security and the expanded voting access provided by the new Georgia law and urge you to join us in doing so by signing our petition, and then we'll let them know of your opinion. Please sign the petition at the top of the LarryElder.com page, and you will see the Stand with Georgia banner. You know, we talk about having a country to save in all seriousness, and I won't ramble here too much because I want to go back to your calls. But do you understand the takeover right now that the Democrats, this massive power play that they are engaged in? And do you know how the scope of this? I mean, you know, everything from $1.9 trillion for COVID relief that isn't COVID relief. It's for Democrat projects. $2.25 trillion in infrastructure for things that are not infrastructure for Democrat projects. A bill to stack the United States Supreme Court. A bill to provide statehood for D.C., adding 2 more Democrats to the Senate. A bill that will then add 2 more Senate seats for making Puerto Rico a state. H.R. 1, the attempt to federalize American elections so that fraud can run rampant in every state and no state can do anything to fight back against it. Mail-in ballots mailed to everybody in America, legal or not legal, citizen or non-citizen. An Equality Act that is anything but equal for anybody, particularly women who are brutalized by this Equality Act if it becomes law. The Green New Deal, which is the complete deconstruction of the entirety of the United States economy. The climate change movement, again, to literally destroy fossil fuels and millions of jobs to put people in the government's debt, to make sure that more and more Americans need to turn to big daddy government for what they need, as we convert from a fossil fuel, energy-reliant country to a new renewable energy country. The Marxist redistribution of wealth that's underway. Reparations. Critical race theory in all schools. Redefining science. Redefining sex. Humankind. Two possibilities. XX, XY, chromosomal science, out the door because somebody has a feeling that they might be something else. Indoctrinating kids with that fiction. We don't let kids make decision on how much ice cream they want to eat, but we're going to let them make decisions on whether they want to take puberty blockers so that they can try to become something that their mind confusingly tells them that they are. Revisionist history about the origin of this country. I mean, it's on and on and on. Do you realize the power grab? And this, from a party, you talk about chutzpah, you talk about hooligans, a party that has the slimmest of majorities, acting like they have this massive nationwide mandate to take everything that we have built in this constitutional republic and tear it apart. They have a tiny 6-seat majority in the House among 435 members, and they lost 15, 16, 17 seats in the last election. They lost. They have a dead even 50-50 majority in the Senate. Only the vice president gives them the tie break. And they have a president who, it can be argued very sincerely and very legitimately, really didn't even win the election. They have the slimmest of majorities, and they act as though they have a mandate to change America, to fundamentally transform America from what it was to something they want it to be. A Marxist, giant government dystopia. Not utopia, dystopia. It's insane, my friends. I'll be right back.
Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
That confirms what we all sort of suspect, America's not in a good place right now. We're just not. I mean, here's a headline you won't see anywhere. Chauvin found guilty. The system worked. No. The progressives don't like that. AOC doesn't approve of that. AOC doesn't approve of that at all. In fact, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez seems very disappointed that Derek Chauvin got the maximum amount of guilt that he could have possibly received at yesterday's trial.
This verdict is not justice. Frankly, I don't even think we call it full accountability because there are multiple officers that were there. It wasn't just Derek Chauvin. And I also don't want this moment to be framed as this system working, because it's not working. And that's what creates a lot of complexity in this moment.
That's a lot of complexity in that, young lady. A lot of complexity in this moment. Justice was not served. In fact, there wasn't even any accountability. And if that wasn't a goofy enough take for you, how about Nancy Pelosi? Nancy Pelosi actually looked up into the heavens and thanked George Floyd for dying.
Thank you, George Floyd.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
You hear a lot of people talk about end of days and whether we are preparing for the raptures. They can be easily forgiven because of all that is happening in our life. This country alone, don't look to the world, but to this country alone, we are watching the American heritage turned upside down. We're watching illegal immigrants given money by a government that denies it to those who are hardworking Americans with families to support. We are looking at a president who wouldn't answer a question, as I said, about packing the Supreme Court, but today he's creating a commission and doing everything in his power to move toward another 4 justices that will dilute the court. It's just one thing after another. And one rational thing that he's done, which is to announce he's bringing home our troops from Afghanistan. That is what President Trump wanted to do years ago and was stymied at every turn by the military-industrial complex.
Yeah, we're not going to mention the neocons and Lindsey Graham because that would be inappropriate. Yeah. Have you been in touch at all? And you don't have to say if you, but I'm wondering if you've been in touch with the president at all.
I've known him a number of times here. I guess most recently a week or so ago. And he, by the way, sounds great. He sounds rested and he's obviously taking on issues every day.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Yep, you'll be in these good hands for another 16 minutes. Thanks for being with us. I was just listening during the break again to the audio of the Columbus, Ohio councilwoman who said in response to the Ma'Khia Bryant shooting at the hands of a police officer as she tried to kill 2 people with her knife. And the councilwoman asked, what would have happened if we had social workers present there instead of police? And I'm just listening to it, and I'm trying to think of what the answer to that would be in my head. And I think the answer is, well, there'd be 2 dead girls from stabbing, and there would be 2 social workers covered in blood screaming, holy crap! That's what would have happened if you'd had social workers there instead of police. 2 dead black girls from being stabbed to death and a couple of social workers covered in blood going, oh my God, what did I just sign up for? There you go. I hope that helps, because that's the answer to your question. I want to go to Minneapolis. Kirk, you are on the Larry Elder Show. Bob France sitting in for Larry. Go right ahead, Kirk.
Hi, Bob. Pleasure speaking with you. I just want to share a couple of stories with the 2 basic topics. One is going to highlight Heather's comments, and the other is dealing with the police brutality on blacks versus whites. I'll start with some comments that just happened in Milwaukee. I have relatives down there, and this highlights Heather's comments. Earlier this week, there were 4 black men that were killed. Police weren't involved, but there were 4 homicides within a 2.5 hour time frame. And then 2 nights later, 2 14-year-old black girls were killed. They were out. It was like about 2 o'clock in the morning. And that didn't make much news either because no police were involved. But again, it highlights Heather's comments about blacks killing blacks. As far as the police brutality goes, what makes national news and what only stays locally, about a year ago, also in Milwaukee, there was a young black man that was shot by the police. The black man was running out from the Popular Mall and running across the parking lot. He turns and shoots at the police, and the police return fire and killing him. Now, that didn't make much news because that officer was black, although there were some local demonstrations in Milwaukee. Just recently here in Minneapolis, there was a man along, if you're familiar with Minneapolis area, there's a major highway that runs from Minneapolis to Iowa. It's called I-35W, and there was a man along that stretch waving a gun, and the police shot him, and that didn't make much news because that man was white compared to what just happened in Ohio.
Yeah, Kirk, let me jump in here just in the interest of time because I do have some other people to get to, and I want to respond to some of what you said first, though. And thank you so much for the phone call. When black officers shoot victims, some might think that removes the racist police argument and narrative from the equation. It doesn't. To the Black Lives Matter Inc. People, to far leftists, black people forego their black skin or brown skin when they become police officers. When they trade their brown skin for blue uniforms, they're no longer black anyway. They're Uncle Toms, they're slave patrol, they are out to, they've turned against their own race, they're race traitors, and they are just as racist as the white cops. That's the sad reality. That's how black officers are viewed by the kinds of people that we're talking about that are routinely involved in these protests and in the argument and the narrative that the police are systemically racist. As it pertains to shooting white people, you're much more on point there. Heather MacDonald pointed out there are far more, in fact, twice as many white people shot on average every year by police, armed and unarmed, than there are black. And I would say to you, name one. If I said name black victims of shooting by police officers, we could sit here and rattle off a list, probably 10, 12, just in the first minute, because they've all been covered. And because they've been covered up one side and down the other, we all think, man, it happens a lot. Look at all the names that we can list. But it happens half as much as it does with whites. But no coverage is given. Not in the New York Times, Washington Post, NBC, CBS, and on down. None of them. So you can't name a white victim of a police shooting, but there are twice as many of them as there are black, which means the media plays just as much, if not the biggest role in this lie, this big narrative that is dividing this country right now, as anybody. The media should report that. Kenosha, Wisconsin. Next, it's Pat on the Larry Elder Show. Hey, Pat, it's Bob. Go right ahead.
Yeah, just 2 things. When I was a kid, my dad used to tell me, hey, you got to listen to the cops because they got the gun. you know. And then another issue I got is, you know, if the Democrats were so worried about the new Green Deal, why are they letting all the illegal immigrants in who are leaving a carbon footprint every day in our country? It just shows you how hypocrites they are.
Well, votes matter more than carbon footprints to the left, and that's that's the answer to your question. Why do they want millions more illegal immigrants coming into this country so that they can then be legalized and given a pathway to citizenship? Because they know that they're going to vote for Democrats, as the vast majority of Latinos and Latinas in the country do. They vote Democrat, so that's that matters more to them. Long-lasting, eternal power is much more important to them than environmental concerns. You have to understand, too, the climate change movement is not about climate. It's not about CO2. It's about dinero. It's about dollars. It's about yen. I don't know too many other currencies. Rubles, euros. It's about money. It's about money. It's about redistribution of wealth. It's about stripping property away from people. That's what Marxism calls for. An end to property rights, public ownership of everything being doled out to the masses as the leadership sees fit, as the Politburo sees fit. The proles, you'll get what we give you. Green energy is not about carbon emissions. It's about dollars. Never forget that. I'll be right back.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
I was there, front row, in the ellipse, listening to my old boss, President Trump, on January the 6th. Video cut to play cut.
I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
That's what he said, to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. This is what Maxine Waters, who has a track record of doing this, as Congresswoman Green just said, after curfew, not even in her another constituency of her state, in another state, said yesterday. Video cut one, play cut.
Oh, no, not manslaughter. No. This is guilty for murder. I don't know whether it's in the first degree, but as far as I'm concerned, it's first degree murder.
Congresswoman, what happens if we do not get what you just told? What should the people do? What should protesters on the street do?
I didn't hear you.
What happens?
What should protesters do?
Well, we got to stay on the street, and we've got to get more active. We've got to get more confrontational. We've got to make sure that they know that we mean business.
This has got to be personal for you, because you're being accused, and for months, of the worst things. They're throwing you off your committee assignments, trying to get you kicked out of Congress. When you hear women, Congress women, say more violence, more confrontational, what does it mean for your supporters and for patriots, Congresswoman?
Oh, this is personal for me on every level, because the whole reason why I ran for Congress is for people over politicians. This government is out of control, and they think it's the other way around. These politicians here in the swamp, they think that all of this is here to serve them, and that's how they operate.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
Hatred of the whites, is it because of slavery? And my argument is that it is not. Why is Shakespeare hated? Did he have slaves? Right? That should do it on its own. Every nation had slavery. Are they all hated? Whites are hated for creating America in the West. That's why they want to bring down. They use white hatred as the cover for West hatred. Remember when President Trump gave this magnificent talk in Poland? Magnificent. On behalf of Western civilization. New York Times declared it a white supremacist talk. That's right. It makes perfect sense. They hate the West. The left hates the West. The left hates order. The left hates capitalism. I point out in my column.
Hop, and I'm talking about 80s school hip hop. Gregory Jacobs, otherwise known as Shock G, lead vocalist for the Digital Underground. Known best for Humpty Dance, which you're hearing right now, has passed away. Very sad news. I'm going to do this, even though it's against my best judgment. LeBron James is being dragged, and rightfully so, for his, and that's a way of saying online being criticized, for his incredibly ridiculous threat against a police, maybe illegal threat against a police officer, when after the shooting in Columbus, he posted a picture of that officer and said, "You're next." You know you have gone afoul of all that is right and virtuous when you are now getting advice on how to handle things like this from Orenthal James Simpson. That's right. LeBron James, take some advice from O.J. Simpson on how to handle these things.
But sometimes you need to take your time and be a little more patient before you comment on some of these bad incidences that are happening with police departments. This one, LeBron should have waited. I'm a little upset with most of the media because they showed us edited versions of what took place with the girl with the knife.
Does it strike anybody else as just surreal that O.J. Simpson chose to record himself on a video, put on Twitter, advising LeBron James on how to deal with a situation involving a knife? I want you to ponder that for a second. Here's a guy telling LeBron James you should think twice before you post something about a situation involving somebody with a knife. You're welcome for the advice. Sincerely, O.J. Simpson. Are you kidding me? This is a Saturday Night Live sketch, but it's not. It's real. O.J. Simpson advising LeBron James. I don't know. I don't even know what to do with that. Other than the fact that O.J. Simpson is just bound and determined to convince every single American, every single person in the world, that he really did murder his ex-wife and her friend in 1994. That he really did it. He wrote a book that said, "If I did it." Now he's making videos after knife attacks and people being shot during knife attacks. Next thing you know, he's going to record a video talking about, if there had been a police officer near me when I was beheading my ex-wife and her good friend, maybe things could have turned out differently. Unbelievable. And that's where we're going to have to leave it for this edition of the Larry Elder Show. I really appreciate you being here and being a part of it. I want to say thank you to the crew, including Sean and including Chris running the phones, including Brad, the producer. Great stuff by everybody. Thanks to my guests, Heather MacDonald, Gary Wolski, and Jason Pappas as well. My name is Bob France, coming to you from Cleveland, Ohio. A reminder that you can listen to my show, if you are so inclined, locally here in Cleveland every weekday, Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. Eastern, by logging on to WHKradio.com. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.